In 2001, it was a second term for Tony Blair, but the end of term for file-sharing platform Napster, as the news reported with an unusually strange voiceover and music track.
Ah, Napster, a name that brings a warm glow to copyright lawyers all over America.
They'd been a bit clueless about copyright, but being clueless was really what 2001 was all about. Afro Man's cluelessness is, I think, the result of something he's been smoking, shown in his chilled-out video.
Because I got high, because I got high, because I got high. La, da, da, da.
Kids, if you copy Afro Man, you'll end up having to drive this silly car. There was plenty of clueless filmmaking like Pearl Harbor, for instance, which told the story of the tragic explosive battle between Ben Affleck and Kate Beckinsale as they competed to be the very worst at acting.
But I just want to know why. Just tell me that, will you please? Just tell me why.
Rafe, I'm pregnant.
I am cringing at how bad this is. Even Apple hadn't quite got their heads together in 2001 with the very first iPod, as seen in this haphazard advert. How do you make a phone call with that thing? I'll stick to my Nokia brick, thanks. But if you did have an iPod, you could listen to this, Limp Bizkit, the unwanted sound of 2001. Fred Durst is an appalling driver. He's on the phone, dancing and climbing around in the back of the car. How irresponsible, Fred. And that was 2001. Definitely my most embarrassing year.
Not a good time to be a teenager, Joel, 2001.
When you look back, you're like, oh, so fun, innit? It's just like so ridiculous, all of that stuff, you know? Weirdly, so LimeWire, I remember when I first had LimeWire, I would just literally sit on my computer and download everything onto my first iPod. So I'd type in like emo music, Green Day, Nirvana, and then just download everything. And this is probably bad for speak so literally. I'm sorry about that. Charlotte Church, everything free, please, thank you. And I typed in. I remember just sitting there going, "What else is there?" And I typed in comedy, and loads of comedy stuff, American stand-up came up. And I downloaded it all, put it on my iPod, and I listened to all that stuff. Became obsessed with American comedy, and that's how I got into stand-up. Is that I downloaded it on LimeWire, and I wouldn't have found it and become obsessed if I didn't do it in that way.
What about the sort of the cinema and the Pearl Harbor we saw there? Did you see that?
I mean, to be fair, I actually thought it was a pretty good movie.
Did you?
I thought it was pretty great.
It wasn't so popular with reviewers, I don't think.
Yeah,
was it?
after watching that movie, I actually went to Pearl Harbor to try and find Kate Beckinsale. There was no planes. I couldn't believe it. No planes crashing into ships.
2003 was the year that George W. Bush came to the UK and Concorde went to the US on its very last flight. For me, it was a year when everything went a bit gooey. There was Love Actually, a sickly romantic comedy that halfway through turned into a stalker's manifesto. This was also the year of possibly the most disturbing chewing gum advert ever made. Mind you, the graphics were pretty good. It's the poor dog I feel sorry for, having to stay inside that man all that time. 2003 was the year of the heat wave, where everyone found the soaring temperatures just too much.
It's not too bad. I thought it was going to be a lot hotter than it was.
Oh. When 2003 wasn't just icky, it was just a bit embarrassing. Which brings us to Gemini, who travelled to Latvia to compete in Eurovision, but left the tune back home in the UK.
Love's not enough. I need your trust, but you don't try anymore.
They're giving it a good go, at least, with the dancing. Nil point for Gemini and nil point for 2003. Definitely my most embarrassing year.
Ouch.
Just special. I think, to be honest, like, a lot of the noughties were just absolutely culturally desolate. It was a cultural wasteland where nothing good happened.
So you weren't a fan of... I mean, Gemini, that was quite a hard watch, that one.
Yeah.
They scored no points, bless them.
Oh, did they? No.
I mean, it's all in the name. It's both, but Gemini is supposed to be a split personality. One of their personalities just couldn't sing.
Just couldn't do it. Just couldn't hack it. But yeah, I think in general the noughties were just a very embarrassing time.
When would you have liked to be a teenager?
Ooh, I would have loved to have been a teenager in late 60s, early 70s.
Yeah.
I just think that was like...
Because?
It was a real cultural revolution. Like, you know, you're starting to get the beginning of, like, protest and the music and the fashion and
You don't think we'll look back on 2003?
No, like, there's such soul in that time, you know? And I think by the noughties, it's just devoid of any, like, depth.
In 2008, we started digging the Olympic site in Stratford. And America started digging this guy. Ah, there he is, old Bazza. It was a year that wanted to be cool. The Pussycat Dolls wanted to be famous, but made famous sound kind of rubbish, as we can hear in this one-note track. Literally, it only has one note. Now, you really don't want groupies, girls, believe me. Oh, and also, stop dancing on cars. Also trying to be cool was Jeremy Paxman in this slightly cringy interview with Dizzy Rascal.
Mr. Rascal, do you feel yourself to be British? Of course I'm British, man. You know me.
Yeah, I don't know if he does know you, Dizzy, mate. He is Jeremy Paxman. While some people tried to be cool, people we already thought were cool used 2008 to show us they weren't. Like John Lydon, who sold out his punk credentials to star in this incredibly British advert for butter with a load of cows and some incredibly over-the-top acting.
All because he's made only from British milk.
But the real hero of 2008 was someone who was as interested in being cool as he was in knowing how to dance. In both cases, not at all, as we can see here. John Sargent, we salute you, and your terrible dance moves. As for 2008, definitely my most embarrassing year.
How old were you then, Munya?
2008. I would have been 16.
Not a good time to be a teenager?
I think I was on the cusp of breaking free of my kind of dad's sort of regimented sort of upbringing, which was obviously just done to make sure I was a good kid. But I think because I was at the edge of that, that's when I, like, got a mohawk and started, you know, wearing the rapper's jeans and getting medallions and stuff. Not becoming bad, but just sort of on the verge of my experimental phase when it came to fashion and music and stuff, and not really knowing who I was. That's why it was so embarrassing, because if I look back at the stuff now, I cringe over it, because it wasn't kind of like, I didn't have a personality, I was just
Were you into
trying.
this sort of stuff?
Yeah, I wasn't a big fan of Strictly.
Do you remember the Paxman interview, the Mr. Rusk?
I remember that's when, because of the sort of the age of the internet, and we start to see a sort of bridging of worlds where you would see people like Jeremy Paxman interviewing Dizzy Rascal. And I think that's what led to some of sort of the cringy moments that you'd then get on viral moments, you know, because people could then share moments like that as well. So I think it became an embarrassing year for the world, because now, anytime you did something, it was on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. That's what made it embarrassing, because we weren't doing it in private anymore.